And we are live on the precipice of what promises to be a massive snowstorm here in Missouri. It is 3 degrees out, and I am your host, Mediocrity4. This is Media's live show, episode 34, I think? Right? 34? Right, we're on 30. Yep, we're on 34. Oh, we're coming up on a year of doing these weekly live shows. We got a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. Uh, First of all, I dropped that childhood friend show. Like I might go back and watch it, but I started watching episode 3 and I was just bored. I was very bored, and I had other things. I was like, man, I would much rather be watching Free Run right now. That sucked because I had already seen the episode of Free Run, the season 2 premiere, and episode 2 hadn't come out yet. So like, man, I really just want to sit here and twiddle my thumbs and wait for episode 2 to drop. I would much rather be like doom scrolling on YouTube or Twitter than watch the show. Like that's kind of the breaking point for me. If I'm watching a show and I'm starting to think, man, I would rather be doing literally anything else, that's when I drop a show. But speaking of which, the big show this week is Rear-In. So we are doing this a little later in the week than usual. Usually I do these live shows on Tuesday. I'm having like a temporary schedule change to where I'm off on Fridays, which is why we're doing it tonight. And because of that, I have the first 2 episodes of Rear-In season 2 to talk about. It's good. Like, it's still good. It's still solid. I don't think there's been anything super special about this season yet. Hasn't, like, I don't know. Okay, so episode 1 didn't. I do like that they are, putting a lot more focus on Stark as the frontliner and kind of giving him development and, exploring the fact that he's kind of falling in love with Fern. I love that. I especially love it because I love Stark, and he kind of got the short end of the stick in the second half of season 2 with the mage exams. He was not around for very much of it, and which does him an even further disservice because he did come into the season so late. So he only had like the 7 or 8 episodes of development before he got benched for the mage exams. I still love his moments in the mage exams. I love like the Warrior's Way bit with him and the old man. But still left to I missed him. I missed him kicking ass. I missed him being strong for no goddamn reason. I love that about him. And I love his relationship with Fern. I love that we're actually getting some development on that front. What is over there? Oh, it's a newspaper that I got. Like, what is in my background? I'm actually going to, I need to shut my camera off for a bit. Sorry, like I said, it's like 3 degrees. So my sinuses are horrible, horrible today. Even worse than usual. But yeah, episode 1 was like a lot of pining from Stark. Uh, he had to like kind of be the MVP for the first half of the first episode with these crystals that like shut off people's ability to use magic. I think that's neat. I think that's something that worlds like this need. Like every, I'm gonna turn my. Man, uh my sinuses are very bad today. Uh, but no, I think this is something that any fantasy world needs. Like anything with fantastical elements, you have to kind of explain away why or how these people can be contained. These crystals seem to be doing that, and I'm glad they do it in a thing that's like, oh man, where a lot of times stuff like this will be introduced in a prison arc, where it's like, oh, we got to put you in these magic handcuffs that take away your ability to use magic, or put these collars that suppress your superhuman abilities. Uh, but this was done in much more like they find a mine of this stuff and then just have to like get out with Stark's help, and they also have to just run. Like they end up coming across a monster that Stark isn't able to handle on his own, and he has to like carry them both out. And of course, it reminds Freeran of some of the adventures she had with her old party. That's always really sweet. I always like that. Episode 2 mentioned the hero of the South, who looks suspiciously like some of the people from Stark's village uh, from season 1. What else was in episode 2? Episode 2 was better. Like, I love the moment with the hero of the South coming to see Freerin and being like, I know that I'm not capable of convincing you to join me. I know I'm not the one who's going to defeat the Demon King, but I can see the future, and I will clear a path for you by taking out as many of the 7 Sages of Destruction as I can. And he does, and it works. And I like I like that we actually have a flashback with Freerin that, while connected to her time with Himmel, doesn't directly relate to Himmel or Flom. Like, it's kind of helping fill in that gap, though not filling it out by much. He says it's like within a year of her meeting Himmel. So, but every little bit counts. Uh, I I like how proud Freerin is of all the like little niche spells. Like, oh, Stark, you don't have to do anything because I have a spell that can polish bronze, or I'm doing this in exchange for a spell that can turn a red apple into a green apple, or maybe I had that backwards. It's really fun. It's really neat. This is just a fun show. But then we also get some action with the sword demon. Demon steals this, prized heirloom sword, and the party have to go and chase her down and find it. And the demon is like disguising itself as a priest in order to get the drop on unsuspecting travelers. Freeran is able to like kind of like see through the bullshit, get the move, which I think was in the trailer of Stark like using his axe to parry the sword. So it's a pretty neat fight. It's very short, but like this is just one random demon versus 3 incredibly powerful people. But speaking of one demon versus several incredibly powerful people, or maybe not, let's jump into JJK season 3. We have episode 3 and 4 to talk about this week. Episode 3 was boring. Granted, it's not the studio's fault. This is how it was in the manga. It's a bad part of the manga, so it's a bad part of the anime. With Tengen doing the exposition dump. And honestly, I don't know how they could have made it better. Like, an attempt was made to like add some visual flair with all the rules and the backstory, and seeing little artistic glimpses of like Toji and Gojo and Kinjaku, and how all of them kind of like fit into this picture, and how everything has kind of like led up to this, and how this isn't even Kinjaku's first attempt at doing this. Yet Tengen doesn't really know his motivation or what he is ultimately trying to do, because while he has a lot of memories and can like see everything. He can't see what is inside people's hearts, which is really neat. It leaves a little room for maybe some reveals later on down the road. Of course, we got the before I even knew who Kenjaku was, I knew about this plot twist because of memes. Like, one of the first JJK memes I ever saw was a picture of, like, Yuji's mom with the, like, scars on her forehead and saying, nah, I take back shots. I had no idea what the context was. But then, the more I found out the context, like, oh man, Kajaku, he's very dedicated to the game. Very dedicated to his evil goals. Like, you think Doflamingo would get pregnant for the sake of his machinations? No, like Kenjaku would. I have no idea what the Kenjaku's deal is, why he's doing it, what his backstory is, what even kind of like person he is, but I already like him more than Sukuna just for the audacity of that plan. But then episode 4 was my favorite episode of the season so far. It's Maki versus the Zenin clan. Uh, it's good. Like I get, not really sure what all it's trying to say. And from what I've heard, the whole clan drama stuff and with the JJK higher ups is never like really explored beyond this point. Like, it's just kind of, all about Kijaku and Sukuna from now on. Like, we're kind of done with this, as far as I know, from the little bits that I've been spoiled on. She wasn't on absolute demon time here. Uh, not quite sure how, again, like, I'm not quite sure how I feel about the Maki Mai stuff and how, oh, they're twins, and so neither one of them were complete so long as the other one was alive. And Maki can't like fully awaken her physical prowess until Mai dies, and kind of makes me think like, oh, if Maki died instead of Mai, would Mai have basically become JJK's Green Lantern? Because her power is creation, so like, would she have gotten a massive power up as well? Would she have been able to like defeat the entire Zenin clan? Uh, Clan stuff always interests me, and like having hereditary powers is always like a neat thing for me to me because it gives it like a structure in which people can actually like develop and push these techniques further than they had before rather than trying to like figure everything out on your own with each generation. It's the same idea as like teaching in general. Like the whole reason why humans spent 10,000 years with nothing but sharp sticks is because we didn't have the means to teach people to build on stuff. And so technology and stuff progressed faster and faster and faster until we kind of hit a limit here in the last like 15, 20 years. We kind of hit a limit on what we can do with the resources we have available to us now. Like, now all we can do is make things like smaller, more efficient, more compact, maybe a little more powerful. But yeah, we've kind of hit a plateau on technology in the past, decade or so. But it's obvious to me that whoever directed this episode really likes Kill Bill. I got massive Kill Bill Volume 1 vibes from this whole Slaughterfest. It was a Slaughterfest. Like, Maki did not hesitate a second to scalp her own dad and just brutalize everyone. Shout out to Naoya for, like, surviving that skull-shattering punch. People have been dunking on this guy since he lost to Chozo. I do know he has his fans. I take him as like an antagonistic force, and he is the only one to actually like make Maki sweat. So he is very clearly much stronger than the rest of the Zenin clan. Uh, but that not enough. But uncomfortable implications with some of the Zinning clan stuff, especially since I heard that apparently Gege said that Mai has like a crush on Megami, even though they're cousins. Like, there's a lot of incestuous teases and stuff in here, and it's at least it's not fetishized. At least I didn't think it came off as fetishization, which is good because a lot of historically a lot of these types of families do have history with that sort of thing. So it was very believable. I found it very believable. On top of the action being, incredible. Naoya versus Maki it's up there with like Sukuna versus Jogo as like my favorite fight in the series. Kind of funny that so many of the best fights in JJK are stomps. It makes me kind of question like JJK has a pretty fair and balanced power system. I think I think its power system is actually one of the best out of all of the like major shonen titles, but it never really feels like any of the fights are fair because like just think of the big fights you have a bunch of fights where it's multiple people versus one person. Like the Yuji and Nanami versus Mahito. The whole Mahito slugfest at the end of season 2, or their stops like Sukuna versus Jogo or Gojo versus Jogo. Poor Jogo, he's one of the most powerful characters in the series, and his only two fights are against the literal two best. Moving on to different kind of kung fu. So I don't talk about comics very often on here. I do talk about like comic characters and comic books as a whole, but I haven't ever actually recommended a comic, at least not a newer-ish comic. But I gotta talk about Batgirl 2024. Oh man, where do we even begin with this? I'm a huge Cassandra Cain fan. I have been ever since I read the novelization of No Man's Land back when I was in middle school. Uh, Batman No Man's Land's novelization is kind of what got me into the actual Batman comics. Before then, I was all about like Batman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, Batman Beyond. I was in middle school, so Batman Begins had come out, but The Dark Knight hadn't. I would have read this in like 2006, 2007 is when I read the novelization for No Man's Land. Like I had no when I first read No Man's Land, like I didn't really have a good idea like who Tim Drake was other than the Robin after Dick Grayson. Like I didn't even know that he was the third Robin. I didn't really know why Dick Grayson became Nightwing. Like I knew he did because of Teen Titans. Like I first found that out from the Teen Titans cartoon. Uh, I had heard of Nightwing. Um, no, in Batman the Animated Series. There's an episode of Batman the Animated Series I had seen as a kid. But like I was too young to like understand what was going on. I just thought like I thought Nightwing was a completely different character, and that the Robin in that episode was the same Robin as other episodes, and that they just like changed the art style and made him shorter for some reason. Like it didn't really dawn on me that was a different Robin. I was like 5. Okay, give me a break. Uh, but like really, I didn't previously know who like Black Mask was. No Man's Land was my first run-in with Black Mask. Because Black Mask did not appear in Batman the Animated Series at all for some reason, even though I think he would perfectly fit. Like I don't know why they didn't use him. They used plenty of other like kind of dark characters, like they used Bane in a couple episodes. They used Two Face. Black Mask isn't as messed up as Two Face. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I know they didn't use Jason Todd in Batman the Animated Series because they didn't want to do Death in the Family. That was kind of like the thing Jason Todd was known for at that time. And there was no Red Hood yet. I mean, there was, but there wasn't. There was no Jason Todd as the Red Hood when Batman the Animated Series was coming out. Uh, that's also why like Cassandra Cain never made it into that world. She kind of came in a little too late to be in that world. Like Batman the Animated Series was over by the time Cassandra Cain made her debut in the comics. And because of that, she's had woefully few adaptations. Like she's in Young Justice as Orphan. Although I haven't gotten season 4 yet. I've heard a lot of people kind of complain about the way she was portrayed there. Uh, she was in there was a character named Cassandra Cain in Birds of Prey, the movie, but that was such a bastardization of her character. It was one of the absolute worst adaptations of any comic book character ever. It was worse than Deadpool in X-Men Origins Wolverine. It was worse than Lex Luthor in Batman v Superman. It was worse than Brainiac in Superman 3, and I don't even think that was supposed to be Brainiac. I think that's just what a lot of Superman fans assume they were going for there. Uh, because Cassandra Cain, she was the first Batgirl to get her own solo series. She got one in 2000 that ran for like 70 issues. She's been in and out of continuity since then. She was temporarily erased from existence with the New 52, but then brought back as Black Bat. Another adaptation of her. She is in DC Universe Online, but she doesn't really do anything. She's actually just a vendor for a pretty powerful suit that you can get if you're in the tech branch of the Justice League. Uh, but yeah, I did read the first volume of Batgirls from 2021, which kind of like paired her up with Stephanie Brown, the spoiler, aka Batgirl number 3. For some fun adventures. I liked that story. I liked the direction it took the characters. I hated the art style, which is why I ended up dropping it and just reading spoilers online, as I do with comics. Most of the time with comics, I will, if something interests me, if a premise of a storyline or an arc interests me, I'll read like the first few issues just to get a feel for how the writer treats the characters. And then from there, I will choose whether or not I continue reading or if I drop it. And by continue reading, I mean wait for like the trades to come out. And that's kind of what I did with Batgirl 2024. I loved the art. I loved the couple images I saw of the first issue. And I was like, all right, I'll wait for the trade of that to come out and I'll check it out. And I did. I checked it out and I am so hooked and locked into the story that for the first, yeah, actually, yes. For the first time in my entire life, I'm reading something month to month or plan to read something month to month. I've never done this with a comic before. Uh, yeah. I'm not caught up yet. I'm like on issue like 7 and there's like 16 issues now. So I'm a little over so I'm like halfway caught up. But this will be the first ever comic book storyline that I actually read month to month. That is how good this is. This is the best Batgirl story I've ever heard, I've ever seen. By a long like this blows anything from her 2000 solo run out of the water. The art is so much better. It's actually like giving character and pathos to Lady Shiva. It's really like pushing Cassandra Cain to kind of challenge her place within the Bat family by, like it was so easy for her to push David Kane and Lady Shiva away because of how horribly they had treated her in the past. But now she's kind of like seeing this deeper, softer side to Lady Shiva. And a spoiler alert: in the last issue I read, was like issue 8 or 9. 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, it was issue 9. Is the last one I read, so I am over halfway done. Uh, she finds out she has a brother. That Lady Shiva and Bronze Tiger had a kid, which means that Cassandra Cain has a half brother that she didn't know about because of this new character, Jade Tiger. And he seems fun. Like, Bronze Tiger's like, careful, kid. Batgirl is one of the best living martial artists on the planet, and he's like, dope. Have at me. Let's do this. I like these shonen ass fucking DC characters. It's one of the things I always dug about Lady Shiva. Uh, she's not like an interesting character. At least she wasn't until this run. Uh, but Lady Shiva's always been like neat as a plot device. You know, she's the one who helps Batman get back into the swing of things during the whole Nightfall saga. Uh, she beats the snot out of Cassandra Cain during the 2000 solo run. Like, I always dig her when she pops up in other media, like I dug her in Arkham Origins, and I dug her in I'm digging her in Young Justice for the little bit that she's in season 3. Uh, but yeah, I highly recommend this. This is the best DC book. This is just simply the best superhero book I've read in like a decade. Uh, at least as far as American mainstream comic book companies go. Like, this is the most I've enjoyed anything coming out of the Batman branch of the DC universe since like 2005. Been like 20 years since I've enjoyed Batman. Well, it's been at least 10 years since I've enjoyed a Batman anything. Now, Arkham Knight came out a little over 10 years ago now. So that was the last time that I legitimately enjoyed anything Batman related. Uh, that wasn't like me just going back and reading old comics. But now on to the main topic of discussion. Gonna blow my nose again real quick. So I'm back on, and then I'm gonna. Because I got a lot of stuff I want to talk about. I didn't want to make slides for all of it. So over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of debate around like localization specifically. Now the whole like subs versus dubs argument has always been a thing. It's been a thing. It predates anime. Like subs versus dubs, like that goes all the way back to like the '60s when Akira Kurosawa films were being released, and you had like Godzilla, Gojira versus Godzilla. Like people have been debating over that stuff all the time. And as far as subs versus dubs, that is a preference thing. I typically actually prefer dubs because I like to like multitask when I'm watching TV. Like I like to throw things on in the background when I'm like cleaning up or eating or like writing or just like getting exercise, or, like working out or whatever. Not that I like really work out. I pace more. Uh Or like when I worked at the overnight shift, I would watch anime on my shift. Like I would literally like have my phone set up on like my little where the lottery tickets are, and I would like be doing my thing while I have one earbud in and what was I watching? What was I watching? Was it Full Metal Alchemist? I feel like it was. I almost said Full Metal Alchemist. What was it I was watching? Oh, Detective Conan. Case closed. I was watching some Detective Conan. There in the last couple months I was working at that gas station. But that's a completely separate debate because a lot of people they don't like to have to read when they're watching shows. A lot of times that can actually distract them because they're so focused on reading the dialogue as it pops up that they completely miss what is happening on the other 98% of the screen. This was actually a big issue for me with Kaguya because Kaguya-sama has a lot of talking, and it has a lot of people talking at the same time. Like you'll have two characters talking at the same time, talking at each other, while another character is mumbling in the background, while the narrator is also talking. So you have like 5 different lines of text uh, plastered over the screen to the point where, like, if you're watching a sub, you can't tell what's actually going on visually because you're having to pause every few seconds. You're having to try to like keep up with all the dialogue and stuff. Like there comes a point where just dubs are preferable, regardless. Like just whether or not it's actually a preference for you or not. There comes a time where dubs are just superior to the original. I'm not even saying that the Kaguya-sama dub is better than the subs. I don't think that. Like, I think a lot of their choice for voice actors is a little not great. But I've always had a problem watching Kaguya-sama because of that. For that reason. Uh, but that's not really what I'm talking about because the localization issue it affects both subs and dubs. Like this is something that affects both camps. And I think that's why the anime community has been so united in trying to like check this stuff and try to like push back against it. So there's always going to be trouble with translations. Uh, Different languages, especially when they come from different language families, they're going to have different attitudes. They're going to have different things that they are drawing reference from. They're going to have different slang, different lingo. They're going to have different sentence structures that don't really flow well when translated from a different language. You see this a lot with music, especially. For something that sounds super poetic and nice in one language sounds clunky and dumb when you try to just do a straight translation of it. Uh, and my primary foray into the art of like translation actually comes from my time in Bible school. I spent 2 years at a Christian college where I took classes on like hermeneutics and evangelism, biblical history, stuff like that. Most of what I know about the Bible I learned from those 2 years of Bible college. And there are two different types of translations, especially when you're going from when it comes to text. There's like word for word and thought for thought. Word for word is where you take like each character, each word, and be like, okay, what is the closest equivalent word we have to this? What is the closest equivalent word we have to that? And then occasionally you'll have like they'll like mix some things up just to smooth it out and make the sentence structure match what they're translating it to. But overall, the actual word choice is as accurate as they can get it. Thought for thought translation actually works better when you're translating from one language family to another because you take entire sentences or phrases rather than word for word. Be like, okay, this is what this sentence is saying. What is a sentence that gets that same thought across? Uh, and both have their merits, both have their downsides. Word for word tends to be a lot more clunky, and a lot of times you'll run into trouble where there is no equivalent word. And this is before you add like the maliciousness in. the malicious angle in, which does happen even in Bible translations. But like in Ecclesiastes, there's a word, I don't remember what the actual Hebrew word is. It's been a long time since I've had this refresher. But when I was like, oh, nothing is permanent. That Ecclesiastes is all about the impermanence of things. There's time for this and time for that. You can't be like super firm. You can't be like one note. You have to be flexible because, everything has a place, everything has a season. And you have to be like willing to roll with those punches. That's what Ecclesiastes is all about. But it uses this word that tends to be like translated to like vapor or air or something like that. When like there's not really an English word that is equivalent to that Hebrew concept. Another big one is the Nephilim. The Nephilim, we don't really know what the cultural context there is, so we don't even bother translating that word. We just keep it as the Nephilim. And that you'll see that a lot too, where they'll just like not even translate a word. You'll actually see that in like later translations. A big popular biblical example is Lucifer Morningstar. Having a character named Lucifer Morningstar is like having a human named Guy Man. Lucifer is Latin. The actual word I think was like Estella or something. Again, it's been a while since I've looked at the Hebrew equivalent of these words. But the word used there is the same Hebrew word used for the morning star. The morning star being the planet Venus, because it's the brightest body in the sky. It's the third brightest body in the sky. The first is the sun, second is the moon, the third is the planet Venus. So there's always a lot of like astronomical weight given to that planet. It's always denoted to like one of the more powerful gods, Venus or Astartes, Lucifer. No. But in the Bible, in the original like Hebrew text, it's not even treated like a name, it's treated like a title. But it got translated from one language to another, to another, to another, to another. And when it got translated to Latin, it got translated to the word Lucifer. And then when it was translated from Latin to other languages, they just kind of stopped translating it because it should be called the Morning Star. If you actually want to do like a a word for word translation of the Hebrew text, the word that got translated to Lucifer should not be translated to Lucifer. It should be translated to Morning Star. But Lucifer is also a name in Latin. Morning Star is not a name in English. So people who translated it from Latin to English translated it to Lucifer, the son of the morning star, which then got kind of like bastardized during the writing of Paradise Lost into a full name, Lucifer Morningstar, even though he is never called Lucifer Morningstar in the Bible. In fact, the character who is referred to as the Morning Star in the Bible might not even be Satan. It might actually just be a dude. Like a regular human dude who thought he was better than God. It is not very clear. It's very poetic. It's a prophetic book that this was all in. So it's all up to interpretation. And language is inherently interpretive. Language is never going to 100% be clear. Because words change, ideas change, cultures change, language is fluid. And you have to like give it your best shot, really. And not only that, but especially when it's written language, because spoken language always comes first, and then written language is trying to approximate the vocal spoken language. But that can be difficult to do, because when I am speaking to you, I have inflections, I have pauses, I have dramatic pauses. I have sarcasm. I can do funny voices. I'm Yakko Warner. You have all that stuff with spoken language that you don't have with written language. And a lot of these stories, especially, the myths and legends, the Odyssey, the Iliad, the Bible, they were all spoken first and then written as like trying to translate that into words. And it also, another kind of hurdle is that it takes time for two languages to adjust to each other, especially when they're not from the same language family. Uh, a lot of the romantic and Latinized languages, like it's really easy to translate from English to Spanish because they have a lot of the same words. They have a lot of the same words, they have a lot of the same rules, they have a lot of the same stuff going on, and it's because they come from the same like language family. It's even easier to translate from English to German because they share like a lot more words than even Spanish, and share a lot more rules, and share a lot deeper history. Like English is an offshoot of German when you get down to it. But on top of those, back in the day with film and animation, you also had technical limitations. You could only work with the film that you got. You couldn't, a lot of these studios that were in charge of like translating and dubbing these shows, they didn't have the resource to like make new animation or draw things or redraw lip flaps or change the timing on the film. They had to like work with the limitations of the rules, and that caused them to try to like, and that's what pushed them to do what we would consider a dated job because we don't have those same obstacles anymore. Uh, so even though anime has been getting dubbed since the like 60s and 70s, Astro Boy and Speed Racer. One of my earlier live shows was talking about how anime has always been as popular as it has been available. I talked about like each decade and some of the standouts from each of those. Dragon Ball Z was the first time an attempt was made. And the original Funimation, it's not even the original. Funimation's dub of Dragon Ball Z is like the third attempt at an English dub for Dragon Ball Z. But it was the first time Dragon Ball Z, and also the first time an anime, had been given like a legit attempt. Like an attempt was made to be as close to the source material as possible within their own technical and time limitations and budget limitations. Uh, but they also had to fast track some things. Like they couldn't like really, they didn't have a whole lot of faith in people understanding Goku's characterization, so they changed a lot of it to where he was more like Superman. Because people can understand Superman. Like, you don't even really have to get into Superman's backstory to understand Superman. He's, if you are an American, you kind of just inherently know through cultural osmosis a lot of Superman's deal. That's where you get, like, the revelation that Goku's father was a brilliant scientist who developed the artificial moon. Like, that line was just used to pad out timing and try to, like, give an explanation to something that wasn't ever really explained. Again, it was just Funimation not having as much faith in their audience to be able to keep up with that. And that's because Funimation was translating it to a younger audience. Like Dragon Ball Z was originally meant to be aimed at teenagers. But when it was brought stateside, Cartoon Network was like, no, there's going to be like 6-year-olds who watch this. So you have to sanitize it. You got to censor it. Their censorship was a big thing in the 90s for animation. That's why you go back and watch like Batman the Animated Series, you like never see Batman's fist hit someone's face in a close up. It's always either like the camera's pulled way back or it's silhouetted or both, or you'll like see the fist coming and they'll like do a flash and then you'll just see the guy flying into a wall or something in a completely different camera shot. So you have a lot of that in the 90s, and Dragon Ball Z was beholden to that censorship. If it wanted to be aired on television, if it wanted to be aired on Cartoon Network, it had to follow those rules. So they had to change a lot of stuff to follow those rules. And it's like, again, like they did the best they could for the time with the rules and limitations that they had. It's not a great dub. And most of the people who worked on it went on to voice Dragon Ball Z Kai or Dragon Ball Kai, and everyone will tell you that Dragon Ball Kai is just a better product. Like they cut out the filler, they didn't have as many like limitations as far as tech goes, as far as censorship goes. One of the technical limitations is lip flaps. Dub actors were always told like, "Hey, you have to like speak in a way that tries to like match the lip flaps," which is what led to a lot of stuff where people would talk like this because this is kind of the cadence of Japanese speakers, even though they don't actually talk like this because they are actually saying like 10 times as much stuff within that same time frame. Japanese is a much more efficient language. It's much denser. And so, every syllable counts. But when you're trying to like match the pacing of the lip flaps, you end up sounding really weird. But the next kind of step in this whole fiasco was Disney and Ghibli's partnership. It changed everything. Uh, Studio Ghibli did not initially want their stuff to be translated, or they didn't want it to be dubbed, rather, because they knew about the limitations with dubbing and they knew the hurdles that dubbing studios had to overcome, and they didn't want to like make those sacrifices. They didn't want to like make those necessary changes for the sake of an American market. They would rather just have subtitles. Uh, but John Lasseter convinced Miyazaki to relent and to let Disney dub his films. And Disney like kind of proved that they had what it took. They had the resources to kind of like get around a lot of the technical limitations. And because they were films, they could also like kind of just give it the seal of approval to keep as much of the film intact as possible. And one of the things that they did was add an extra dialogue where they would take advantage of quiet scenes to add in more context. Like, a Japanese audience member does not need context for what a bathhouse is. Everyone in Japan knows what a bathhouse is. Everyone who watches anime knows what a bathhouse is now. Because it's just so ubiquitous to Japanese culture and to Japanese media. But it wasn't ubiquitous to American audiences in 2001 when Spirited Away came out. So they took advantage of a quiet scene and had the main character say, "Oh wow, it's a bathhouse." And the word bathhouse, like, okay, it's a house where people bathe. Like, that's really all you need to know. But if you're a Japanese audience member, all you have to do is see what the building looks like and be like, "Oh, it's a bathhouse." But for an American audience member, you have to have the character say, "Oh, it's a bathhouse," in order for young American kids in 2001 to be like, "Oh, it's a bathhouse." That makes sense. I was a kid in the early 2000s, so like I kind of like got to see this happen in real time. I know a lot of people who are a lot younger than me. They kind of like they don't know how good they have it, and that's why I kind of get so heated when it comes to like people dunking on dubs and be like, "Oh man, all dubs are horrible" or whatever. Like, no, you don't understand what a bad dub is. Although you're getting there now. From like 2009 to 2019, there was no bad dubs. Everything that got a dub was good. Because all the limitations and all the red tape that kept dubs from being good had all been broken. All the glass ceilings had broken, all the red tape had been severed. Everything, was set up to where dubbing studios could actually do their job and do it to the fullest. Because more money and more tech fixed a lot of issues. Now Funimation can redraw lip flaps. Now they can kind of like manipulate the pacing of a scene in order to do stuff. And now like anime is so I hesitate to use the word mainstream because it's not. It's not. In fact, I would argue that it's even less mainstream now. Like, you don't have anything that's as big as Pokemon was, or as big as Dragon Ball was at its peak. You don't even have anything that's as big as Naruto was, because everything's so niche now. But there are a lot more people who are watching different anime, and that's actually the thing. Like, what do you mean by mainstream? Because to me, like, there's nothing as ever present as Pokemon. If you were a kid in the 2000s and you watched anime, you watched Pokemon. If you were a kid in the 2000s who watched anime, you watched Dragon Ball. If you were a kid in the 2000s and you watched anime, you watched Naruto. You watched Bleach. You watched the Four Kids Club of One Piece. You watched Death Note. You watched Full Metal Alchemist. You watched Eureka 7. You watched all these shows. You watched Inuyasha. But now, you can be an anime fan and you can watch 4, 5, 6 episodes or 4, 5, 6 shows every season and not even touch the big ones. I have not watched an episode of Demon Slayer in a long time. I avoided Jujutsu Kaisen for years. And I'm an anime fan. Like, I watch anime. I watch about 2 to 3 shows every season. This season, I'm focused on Free Rate. I'm focused on JJK. I'm trying to find like a show that really catches my interest for that third slot. I do have time to watch the third show. I just haven't found one that engages me yet. Uh, and I'll take recommendations if you can give them to me. But you know what I don't watch? I have never watched an episode of Fire Force. I have never watched an episode of Black Clover. I watched like the first couple episodes of Fate. I think it was like Fate Zero, one of the first Fates. I have not watched a single episode of Fate since then. I have not watched ReZero. I have not watched a Gundam show since Gundam Wing back in the early 2000s. No, that's not true. I watched Gundam SD in the mid 2000s, the chibi one. It was on Toonami at the same time that like Dragon Ball was. I didn't watch it because I wanted to watch Gundam SD. I watched it because I liked what was on right after it. But like, what are the big shows that are out this season? Anime Winter 2026. I haven't watched Undead Unluck. I haven't watched. I'm trying to like find the big ones that I know about. I haven't ever watched Hell's Paradise. Now, there's a lot of show. Even though I watch anime, there's a lot of really big shows that I don't watch or that I haven't watched because there's just so much of it. There's so much of it that the market has become oversaturated, and I just can't be bothered. Now, this whole debate really started getting muddled during the Obama years, because during the Obama years we saw a massive effort to politicize art. This is where you started getting a lot of like cancel culture stuff in, and a lot of people being like, oh, this doesn't hold up well, or this aged poorly. Like, those weren't really phrases until the Obama years. At least I hadn't ever heard them. The idea that, oh, they could never make this today never really crossed anyone's mind until people started like going back and tried to force a modern worldview onto older art and older entertainment. As a wise man once said, Hollywood was always red. The rest of the entertainment industry isn't better. And we know this for a fact. Like, we know this beyond the shadow of a doubt, that throughout the entirety of the 20th century, the Soviet Union in particular were sending agents, like actual legit spies and shit, to infiltrate America's entertainment industries, to, infiltrate our news organizations in New York, Hollywood, the publishing industry, the music industry, all the stuff in order to like basically outcast all conservatives and push all the like liberal and leftist and pro-communist sympathizers to the forefront. Like, we just know that as a fact. We've known that since the fall of the Soviet Union, when that all those files went public, and we saw how much money they were sending people like Charlie Chapman and Arthur Miller and shit. Uh, so that's always been a part of the entertainment industry, at least as long as I've been alive. And a lot of the people who are put into power thanks to these communist sympathizers are still in power today. Like, there hasn't been a real legit reckoning for these people, but we might be getting one very soon, because during Obama's second term, they pushed their luck. And I fucking hate to bring this up, but a lot of this is Gamergate. Video games are not a passive art form. It is a lot harder to pull this kind of bullshit with video games. With movies and TV shows and even music, you can have all the like flashy production and vibes and all this stuff, and just weasel in these progressive attitudes and this propaganda, and have this entertainment be a Trojan horse. Well, with video games, you inherently, or at least for good video games, you inherently have to like think about what you're doing, because you are an active participant in the art. Which is why like games aren't like an art in the same way that movies and TV shows are. Games have art aspects. They are like art museums, but they are at their core a competition. They're a competition between player and level design, and player and developer, and player and AI, and player versus player, player versus mechanics. You are taking on the challenges that the developers and your peers, when it's a PvP, have laid out for you. And that's why Gamergate became such a watershed moment. It became like the watershed moment of the culture war, and why so many people 12 years later are still fucking crying about it. We are in Year of Our Lord 2026, and for those of you who don't know or don't remember what Gamergate actually was, it was someone blowing the whistle on corruption in gaming journalism. An indie developer named, I think it was Zoe Quinn, was sleeping with journalists in exchange for positive coverage on her game. One of her lovers found out about the other lovers and decided to blow the whistle on her, ruined her career, and then she became kind of a pariah. And because she was friends with Anita Sarkeesian, they made it about her being a girl rather than her being a whore. But that brought in like the ethics of game journalism, and it was a big mask off moment, because it would be it would have been so easy for, like IGN or Game Informer or Destructoid or Rooster Teeth or any of these companies to be like, hey, we don't do that. You can trust us. We've never done anything like that. But no, they all defended this woman, and they all defended the people who gave this game coverage to own the chuds, and because they were getting implicated and stuff like this. So for the following 10 years after Gamergate, the propagandists overextended themselves and people pushed back. You had things like dubbing studios putting Gamergate references in anime in order to try to like manipulate anime fans into taking an anti-Gamergate stance. And anime fans are like, wait, hold on. I don't think Japan cares about Gamergate. What's going on here? I don't remember that even being in the subtitles when I was reading the manga, 2-3 years ago. What's the deal? And the more that stuff got exposed, the more people lost faith in dubbing studios. And now it's not even just dubbing studios, it's straight up translators doing subtitles as well. They're getting caught in the crossfire because they're not doing their jobs. Another big watershed moment was a year or two ago when a YouTuber by the name of Jello Apocalypse self-reported himself and took the whole industry down with him. Jello Apocalypse was hired to be part of the localization team for, I think it was a video game. It was either a video game or an anime. I don't even remember which one. But he basically said, oh, I hate this, so I am going to change it. Like, I am better than the person I am supposed to be working for. Like, it's this arrogance, it's this ego, it's this idea that these localizers know better than the original writer who actually created the stuff. And that's where a lot of the current outrage over localization and poor dubs and bad translations has been stemming from, has been Jello Apocalypse's being a dumbass and taking the entire industry with him. Because once again, all it would take is for Funimation and Viz and all these companies to be like, hey, we don't tolerate Jello Apocalypse. We don't tolerate people like this. We respect creators. We respect people like Akira Toriyama and Masashi Kishimoto, Tite Kubo, Gege Akatami, Kohei Horikoshi, and we want to do the best job we can. And a lot of these people did. Jello Apocalypse got fired. He got shit canned so fast it was fucking hilarious. But some of the people still defend him. And some of the people still defend this attitude, which is why I have Ghost Stories as the image I'm using as the thumbnail for this live show. Because Ghost Stories dub has hilarious moments. It is basically an abridged, like an abridged parody of the original. And it's because their job wasn't really to translate or to localize it. They were given the footage to be like, do whatever. From what I heard, like, they were basically given free reign. Like, even the studio was like, hey, there's this myth that Ghost Stories flopped in Japan, and so they didn't really care. And that's not true from what I've heard. Like, apparently that's not necessarily true, even though that's what I heard, for years and years. It wasn't until recently that I heard otherwise. And I haven't looked deep enough into it to know for sure, like, who's lying, who's telling the truth. Somebody's lying, though. But from what I heard, like, they just didn't really care, and they were given, like, 3 days to write and record, and so they were just like, fuck it. But the Ghost Story stuff does have funny moments, and it's very fun when put in a YouTube compilation or a TikTok edit, but the actual show sucks. The actual dub for the show sucks. Like, the 10 to 15 minutes worth of comedy gold does not make up for the fact that this is like 6 hours of boring bullshit in between each of those funny moments. But this kind of like, this attitude that these translators know better than the creators and disrespecting them and stuff. It's even affecting like fan translators, which is why we have like agenda farming now and agenda piece. Where you'll have fan translators who like get a hold of these raws, get a hold of these leaks and stuff, and then they'll translate it, and when it's something that they don't like, they'll purposely like misinterpret it in order to like push this agenda and try to like convince people to not read it, or not read it for themselves, not look into it themselves. My Hero Academia had a massive agenda push where like someone was trying to convince, where a handful of overzealous translators were trying to convince the entire My Hero Academia fandom that Deku was completely abandoned for 8 years and that he was like a McDonald's fry cook. No, you had that, and there were still people be like, "Oh, the ending of My Hero Academia was terrible," even though they didn't read the ending. All they heard was these purposeful, malicious mistranslations that they have since run with. And this is why these bad localizers, they're like Dr. Frankenstein. And you want to know what the monster is in that allegory? AI. A year or two ago, studios started playing around with AI in order to cut out the middleman. And this was really blatantly a cost-saving measure. Like, they don't want to have to pay these idiots anymore. But all the localizers have to do is be like, look, we have higher quality product. Now, this is why, like, food service workers will never fully get replaced by automation, because a good food service worker can actually, like, roll with the punches and problem solve in a way a machine could never dream of. Machines can only do what you program them to do. What happens when something happens that they weren't programmed for? Complete shutdown. Computers are not equipped to deal with that. You have to have a human element when you are dealing with human elements. Now, there are things that computers are good at. Calculation, number crunching, algorithms, even to a certain extent. But there are things that a human can do better than any computer could ever dream of doing, because the way computers work is just so fundamentally different from how a human organic brain works. So all localizers have to do is be like, this is the AI dub, this is our dub. You decide for yourself which is better. And they fucked it up. They fucked it up, and they have nobody but themselves to blame, because AI dubs and AI subtitles are horrible. They are, beyond the shadow of a doubt, hideous and ugly and incomprehensibly horrid. This is why, like, people are starting to understand what bad dubs sound like now, because we have AI dubs now. But again, all localizers, all dubbing studios have to do is be like, look, we're not that bad. We're better than that. And they fuck it up because they're not better. There's so many actual dubs and so many localizers and stuff that are actively worse than the AI. And then they want to have a pay raise? They want to make more money? They want equal pay for horrible work? No, equal pay for equal work. Yeah, sure, that's a fun hypothetical, but there is no such thing as equal work. If you do substantially worse than a fucking computer, you deserve to lose your job. Especially when it's like an artistic thing. Like, if you can't draw better than AI, you should not be drawing for money. And I say that as someone who is trying to get into drawing and doesn't draw better than AI. I would never ask you to pay for my art. I would never ask anyone for, like, commission money. Because I know I am not as good as these computers that are already bad at art. I am worse than that. But I don't charge more than they do. These, like, these bad faith localizers, but, you know, it's not, you know, not all men, whatever. Not all localizers are bad. You know? I still really like the My Hero Academia dub. I think the My Hero Academia dub is one of the best dubs of all time. I think they pay immense amount of respect to Koei Horikoshi. They do a good job translating everything and keeping things straight and getting all the thoughts across, getting all the points across, and delivering on those big emotional moments. The voice actors are all great. Dragon Ball Kai is another one. I would throw like Naruto in there, actually. Naruto is actually probably like an early example of like what a dub should be like. I should say Naruto should put in. Naruto, their first kind of like couple of years of doing it with the believe it, like yes, Databayo does not translate into anything. It's just a gibberish phrase in Japanese. And I know Shippuden like just dropped it, which kind of created a bit of a plot hole later on when they tried to actually do something with Databayo. Try to translate it to even though it didn't really work because they never really. That's something that like a Naruto Kai would fix because they had no way of knowing that Kishimoto was gonna actually do something with Databayo. They had no idea that Kishimoto was gonna turn that into like a big emotional thing between him and his mom. No way of knowing that. They just thought, Naruto has this little gibberish catchphrase in Japanese, and we tried translating it to believe it. People didn't like that, so we just dropped it all together, and then, oh, shoot. He did something with it. Now we have to kind of like try to retroactively do that same thing. But getting into more recent events, I already talked about this, but Uma Musume was a total mask off moment. Because this is where, like, the propaganda became fully apparent. Because there's been a lot of debate over the whole, like, every year for 20 years at least. There's been this debate over, like, Merry Christmas versus Happy Holidays. There's a middle ground. There's a very obvious middle ground that a lot of people kind of fall in on. Where, like, if you say, like, no one is going to get offended if you say Merry Christmas. No one. If you celebrate Christmas, say Merry Christmas. If you celebrate Hanukkah, say Happy Hanukkah. If you want to make the conscious effort to like broaden your scope, go ahead, say Happy Holidays. No one cares. But when you have characters in a Japanese show speak in perfectly articulate English, Merry Christmas, and your job is to translate that, you better translate that. By not translating it, the sign says Merry Christmas. The characters are saying Merry Christmas. They have decorations that are very specific to Christmas. The only reason for you to translate that into Happy Holidays is if you are trying to make a political point about Christmas. If you are trying to make a political stance where saying Happy Holidays is more politically correct. That is the only reason to do it. And it is a stupid-ass reason. And that's why Uma Musume kind of like made this debate blow up again. And the reason why I'm dedicating like... I've been going on this subject for 45 minutes now. And I got two other bullet points to touch on before I wrap it up. The reason why I decided to actually do this, even though I've kind of already talked about a lot of this stuff in the past, is because Mother's Basement, Jeff Thu, a YouTuber that I have at various points respected and at various points enjoyed. He was, for a very short time, one of my favorite YouTubers. He came out, he cucked out to the corpos. He cucked out to the Dragon Ball Z, the original like Dragon Ball Z Funimation dub, which is something that not even Funimation would stand behind. He came out in support of like Ghost Stories and saying that that was a better show than what the original author intended. It's total like death of the author, and it's total like corpo cuckery is what it is. Now let's use the most succinct term as possible. It's corpo cuckery. Like he is cucking out to these billion-dollar corporations at the expense of artists. Anybody who defends these people is inherently anti-art. They're inherently anti-artist. They are inherently, anti-comic writer, anti-mangaka, anti-animator, because they believe that no matter how much effort you put in, it is the right of the studio. It is the right of other people who weren't involved in the creative process to change it however they want. It's anti-art. Full stop. No debate. And I will not argue that point. This is one of those things where, like, I'm getting close to where I'm going to start just blocking people on this subject. I will not tolerate this. As a writer, as an artist myself, as someone who is trying to learn how to draw in order to not have to rely on AI and not have to rely on people charging outrageous prices for commissions that aren't worth the money that they want on it. As someone who, uh, you know, I love comic books. I love comic book history. Though there's a lot of characters I like, I don't like how Marvel screwed over Steve Ditko. I don't like how they screwed over Jack Kirby. I don't like that Todd McFarlane felt that he had to create Image Studios in order to protect his own intellectual properties. I don't like how certain characters have been bastardized in the past. I think that I saw a little bit of Chip Zdarsky's Captain America, and I love Chip Zdarsky. I really like Spider-Man Life Story. I really liked his Daredevil. I did not like his Batman. And one page into his take on Captain America, and I fucking hate it. Like, he is already bottom 10 Captain America writers. Because he's oh, this character that these two World War II vets created, that was then brought back to life by one of those same Jewish World War II vets and his Jewish creative partner. Hesitate to call Lee and Kirby friends at this point. There's a lot of bad blood, a lot of complicated feelings between those two men before they died. But they were creative partners, and they were a brilliant creative duo. And I love what they did with Captain America in the 60s. I love how they modernized him. I love that it felt like a natural progression of his character because it was a natural progression of Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby was in a very different place in 1964 versus where he was in 1941. And he brought that to the table. And I love that various writers like Ed Brubaker and Steve Englehart, they respect that, and they bring in the even more modernisms with it in order to flesh that out and further that dynamic rather than just completely change it because we don't like that Captain America has the American flag, so we're gonna make him the straw man for the American government and make him a massive dickhead. You think the A stands for France? Yeah, I don't like when writers do that. My version of Batman is Denny O'Neil's Batman from the 70s. And that is the same version of Batman, ostensibly, that we got throughout the late 80s and throughout the 90s and even, the early mid 2000s, and even occasionally get a little bit in the modern day. You'll have someone be like, hey, remember when Batman was a serious man in an unserious world? And remember when Batman was fun? Remember that? Remember when his stories could be both gruesome and horrible? Horrible in the horror movie sense, not horrible in the quality sense. Horrible in a good way. But still be fun and entertaining and family friendly. Remember when we could do both? That's my Batman, man. Yeah, I don't like the way that these people handle, characters that they had no hand in creating to be this is mine now, and I'm gonna just take pot shots. I'm gonna take the question and make him crazy because I fucking hate Steve Ditko. That was something Alan Moore literally did with Watchmen. The whole reason why Miles Morales exists is because Marvel was afraid that Steve Ditko was going to win his lawsuit and take Spider-Man away from them, and they wanted to back up. The whole reason why Renee Montoya became the question was to dunk on Steve Ditko when he criticized them. There's just a lot of insider baseball, and it almost feels like corpos are pushing for shittier translations, because that's the thing. These bad dubs, it goes all the way to the top. These bad localizers are getting paid a lot of money to purposely translate things badly. And then they're standing by those decisions. Like, they're not throwing the corpos under the bus. They're being like, no, I was in charge of rewriting this, and I'm going to do it the way I want to. Fuck the original creator's intent. And it almost feels like the corpos are pushing these people and promoting these people, letting them fail upwards as an excuse to cut them loose and replace them with AI. And once again, they'll have nobody to blame but themselves. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you for watching. Join me next week. Next week, I'm trying to not rewatch Batman the Animated Series, but re-go through all my notes and maybe shuffle some things around. Because I really want to do a full ranking of Batman the Animated Series, where I go through all things. It's like 114 episodes, but some of them are two-parters, so it's like 100 and I think it's like 101 total like stories for Batman the Animated Series. I want to do a ranking on that. Obviously, we'll have like JJK and Free Reign to talk about over the next few weeks. I'm trying to like get the motivation to watch the new episodes of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. I'm actually dealing with copyright strike or copyright stuff right now on the YouTube channel over one of my old quintuplets videos. And that's been kind of like taking up a lot of my brain power. On top of like trying to get these next two podcasts out. In fact, that later today, I'm actually gonna spend a couple hours editing the Valentine's Day special podcast that we recorded a while back. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.